welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master, Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And happy Monday to everybody. As we here on the northeast coast of the U.S., we are digging out of the snow that is affecting the southwestern part of the country where our guest is from today. So if you're in the U.S. and you're digging out of the snow, welcome to the club. We're glad to have you here today. Are you getting any snow there, Anne-Marie? We've been getting a bunch of it here.
We've just got lots of rain. Very grey, lots of rain.
Which is fairly typical. So yeah, okay, that makes
Pretty
sense.
much.
Yeah. You don't get a lot of snow.
No, well, we do in the UK, but where I live, we're in a dip. We hardly get anything.
Okay. So they leave you out. Well, that's nice. You know, you can avoid shoveling. That's good. So we're joined today by Beverly Meyer, who is, she has a very unusual destination. She is part of what she describes as one of the most rare groups of people in the world. She is a board-certified clinical nutritionist. And we're going to learn more about that in a moment. Among other things, she is one of the founders of what's known as the paleo diet. So this is going to be a very informative podcast that we're doing today. So Beverly, welcome. How are you doing today? We're glad to have you.
Doing very well. Thank you for having me on. I love to share my stories and do what I can to help people feel more comfortable and happier in their bodies and lives.
Well, why don't you give us a little bit of background? How did you end up doing this? I mean, you've been doing this. I think you were telling me you were doing it for over 40 years. I mean, it's a long time you've been doing this. How did you end up getting into this?
I'm in my 70s now, and I became board certified as a clinical nutritionist, which is not a nutritionist, but became board certified in that in 1989. So I've been in practice for a really long time.
Wow.
But my own health journey started in the 70s when I was a college student, and had some issues come up that I was at Duke University and, had the Duke University Medical Center and all of that. And they were not able to help me and really just weren't all that interested. And some friend of mine said, why don't you go see this person? He's not a doctor. He's kind of an unusual guy. But maybe go let him see what he can do. And that's when I worked with this person just at one time for an hour, 2 hours. And he was doing what we now call autonomic reflex testing or autonomic response testing. Sometimes we just call it muscle testing, which of course I'd never seen in the 70s. And in a very short period of time, he's like, oh, look here, let's try this. And just a couple of simple supplements and nothing exotic at all. And it helped my issue about 50-60%, which was, terrific. And that was my eye-opening experience that, wow, there are people out here who know things and unusual things, if not usual, but people that know things that aren't in the traditional medical field. So I've always then I became kind of an alternative health junkie. So
it's a good thing. And to hear that, I didn't even know that muscle testing was a thing in the 70s. So, I mean, to hear your stories like, oh, okay, it goes back that far. I didn't know that.
Yes, it goes back really far. And from Europe, it's where it came from. And, it was unusual having somebody do that. I didn't care. I'm like, whatever, just tell me what you see. And so since then, I've studied with 3 different schools of muscle testing and have kind of made my own, what's the word, when you join together various approaches and make my own way of testing people.
Like a hybrid.
Hybrid, thank you. And I've spent so much time working on my own health and working with so many different types of doctors and practitioners and modalities. And and then I had a career in big business for a while. And being a smart female in the 70s, when the word was first going out that women were supposed to be hired now, you can't all have all male businesses.
Right.
And I was interviewed and grabbed by several really good people. And then I ended up just making my own big company, big franchising business, but my health couldn't handle it. And so that's what really propelled me into more experimenting and more travel and more working with different things to see how I would react. And it's, you get really hooked on the fact that you're taking care of yourself, you're seeing something different, and something is changing. Wow, now I want more. So what else can I see and do that's going to help me and help me change?
Yeah, that's a story that has played out over and over again here on the podcast. We've had hundreds of guests who have come through after having experienced something that was a challenge, even traumatic, sometimes a crash and burn at their end. And they came through the other end and they realized, wow, I've just discovered something really cool. And they want to share it with the world. And they want to keep learning more and more. And it just turns such people into the kind of person you've become, which is the healer who wants to heal everybody else along the way, which is a wonderful thing. So that's very cool. Tell us a little bit too about how the role you played, but more importantly, how the paleo diet itself came about. What that is all about. So that because there's a lot of misinformation these days, including where paleo is concerned. So, fill in the gaps for us. Tell us what that's really all about and where it really comes from.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. When I talk about the paleo diet, when I'm writing on my website on diet and health, or podcasting on my own podcast, I always phrase it as true and correct paleo, because like everything else, there's oh, let's do this modification. And I've seen, paleo cookbooks where half the book is paleo treats and desserts. I'm like, no, that's not really it. But in short story, it started with a client that came to me, and she was quite underweight. She turned out that she had very advanced uterine cancer, but which she was refusing treatment for. And but so I set to work on putting her on a diet that felt comfortable for her and that nourished her. And I don't ask my clients to do anything that I don't do. So I began eating that way too. And it basically was animal proteins, fats, cooked vegetables, some tubers, and not a whole lot of starch for sure. And it worked so well for her that she told me before she passed away, she said, I want you to know I have felt better this last year than I have felt for decades.
Wow.
Even though she was dying. And but it worked so well for her, and I began teaching other people, let's not eat grains. And that's the core of paleo, primal, ancestral, biological, GAPS, the specific carbohydrate diet, my diet DVD, the diet for human beings. We all take grains. Number one, the grains go off the menu. So grains are the seeds of grass. They're grass seed. So wheat, rice, corn, oats, they're grass seeds. That's what they are. You plant them and they will grow. They're grass seeds. And humans did not evolve to bend over and graze. We don't look down to locate food. We look up to watch for motion. We're hunters. So hunters hunt by motion. There's a bird, there's a deer, there's a this. Whereas an elk or an herbivore, they're looking. Of course, they're looking for predators too, but they're looking at the ground for where's some tasty leaves or moss or grasses or whatever they're into. But they're not hunting for motion like, oh, pigeon, whatever. So taking grains out of the diet is a core tenet of all of those that I named. And our human digestive system is not set up for that. Even cows have a hard time digesting grains, and because it's not their natural diet either. They've evolved to eat grass and leaves and weeds, but when they're in feedlots, of course, that's what they're fed is corn and soybeans. So you start with that, which reduces your carb load hugely. And then you increase your animals and your organs and the animal fats. And coconut oil, which is really interesting. Um, here's something really interesting. I just love this. If you're think about the globe, and this is the equator, and then here are the northern and southern areas on the planet. So people at the equator don't have salmon and bears and elk and these higher fat foods. The equatorial foods are much lower in fat, but they have coconuts. So they have the coconut oil, which provides saturated and unsaturated fats. And the rest of people north and south of that large area have the fattier animals. I just think that's so cool that no matter where you are, you have access to saturated fat, and that is a key for what we evolved to eat.
And you bring in saturated and unsaturated fats. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it is something that people are more aware of today than they were in the past. And there's a lot of, I think it's fair to say, misinformation associated with them, to the point where to this day, there are many people, many doctors even, who say you got to get the fats out of your diet. So I wanted you to address that portion of it.
Well, again, we're hunters and gatherers, and we've been that way for a really long time. We only began keeping animals and first growing grasses for the animals, and then learning how to let's take the milk from the animals, which of course we never did before when everything was wild. But as we settled down into tribal areas like canyons or something, and could keep animals there instead of having to hunt them all the time, this was a big breakthrough in human history. But that's unfortunately when we began eating the grains, because we were growing and gathering and handling them to feed the animals. So a lot of change going on. But so a fat is only as healthy as the animal or the coconut that it came from. That's number one. And then the fats that we did not evolve with ready sources were things like olive oil and avocado oil. So those are fine, but they're not the fats that we ate for hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, sure, you found an olive, you could eat it, but we weren't processing huge amounts of oil, and certainly not canola oil and corn oil and these really, really, really dangerously bad for us vegetables, not vegetables, they're not vegetables, the carbohydrate seed oils. So that's the problem is it's just such a long story, but the whole anti-saturated animal, no meat, eggs, butter, etc., basically came from a flawed, small study 50 years ago. And, whatever, it just got into the ubiquitous understanding. Well, then that just means humans shouldn't be that way. So the true and correct paleo says, here's the motto: follow your biology. Follow your biology. And that's what we can, that's how we thrive. That's how our systems, our brains work best.
It's fascinating to me how there are so many truisms, I think you could call them, often within scientific communities, that date back to very small studies that have later been rejected, but the beliefs and ideas that came from those studies got retained. It's astonishing how often that happens. To be honest, there are times it makes me question just how scientific we really are. But it's a very common phenomenon. It happens a lot. And I think one of the lessons that comes from it is, it ties into my own belief about what science really is. There are a lot of opinions expressed about science these days that I don't really align with. The way I like to express it is, for me, science isn't about proving things, it's about discovering things. It's about investigating and then developing your theory, and then testing your theory with getting more evidence, and then developing a new theory and getting more evidence. It's just an ongoing process of gathering information and understanding the information, which in many ways kind of runs against the way science is often practiced these days. So when I hear stories like that, I think to myself, who stopped gathering the evidence? What did they do to make them decide I'm not going to gather evidence anymore? And I don't know what the answer is on that. I'm just kind of throwing that out there to see what your perception is of it.
Well, to do a big double-blind type of study is an enormous process. It's very expensive, very labor-intensive. It takes, people and money and labs and all of this stuff. And, nobody that doesn't have a patented substance, they're not going to invest millions of dollars in studying butter. So I mean, I guess that's not even a great example, because the dairy industry does try to study this, but and you can get 50 studies about coffee is good for you and 50 studies that coffee is bad for you. And so that's part of the problem there, is who's paying for the study and what do they expect to get out of it.
It's very true. You also mentioned the gold standard, the double-blind placebo-controlled study, which is another one of my favorite points to harp on, because so much has been learned especially in the last 30, 40 years, about all the different ways that placebo can actually have a positive impact on people's lives. It's gotten to the point now where I severely question the wisdom of making everything be double-blind placebo-controlled, because there's just so much that we're leaving behind when we do that. And like you pointed out, one of the biggest challenges with that is it's expensive, which means you're going to be very limited in terms of what you can study. So I guess that's my long-winded way of asking, isn't it about time that perhaps science needs to evolve past the golden double-blind placebo-controlled study and start expanding its horizons a bit?
Well, yes and no. It all depends on that true and correct phrase again, that, are you being guided towards a certain solution by your investors or whatever that works. But, the professional supplement companies, so people like myself, I have in my clinic and the online store to my website, these are very high grade professional supplements, and these companies also have to do the research showing, well, why does this product help with a cardiovascular issue, or why is this a better form of zinc than that form of zinc? And so, the supplement companies are doing this as well. It's part of why their products are more expensive than just the random thing on the drugstore shelf. So we do need studies, whether people read them or not. At some point, in my field, I have to just trust. Yes, I like these 12 companies, and I'm going to use their products, and I feel comfortable with that. So.
And well, that's also the ultimate challenge for the consumer, isn't it? Trying to decide who are they going to trust.
Right, exactly, and that's
been the problem for generations.
Yeah, about everything. Who are you going to trust? Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
And so I mean, let's talk about that for a moment. How do you decide who to trust? Because if we tie into the double-blind placebo-controlled model, we're limiting our scope to a very limited scope.
Well, I think it's important. When I'm starting work with a new client on the phone or something, and I say, look, I'm here to help you help yourself. And so that's another one of my mottos: follow the biology, food first. But another one is help yourself to health. And that we as consumers need to be more comfortable and ready to do whatever research that we can, and to try to understand. I went through a very serious health crisis about 10 years ago, and my body, I'm slim anyway. I've always been very slim, but my body just began losing weight, like a pound a month. And when you're already not overweight at all, it became somewhat critical, before too long. And I went to so many doctors and of different modalities, and they were all stumped. They ran whatever tests they could and basically sent me home to die. And so I'm at home, I can't work. I check in with my office, but I really can't work. So what did I do? I spend my own time researching. Now I happen to love doing that, and I feel confident that I can locate and use specific websites or people that I trust. And then for this, I got into the medical journals and so on. But eventually I figured out what was going on with me, and I ran my own labs and ran them again, and then said, wow, I have this genetic immune flaw called common variable immune deficiency, CVID. It's one of the primary immune deficiencies. There's many of them, PIs. So I just figured that out for myself, and ran the labs and reran the labs. I looked at the medications. Oh no, we don't want that. We don't want this. Oh, this looks like the better way. And then I went to the immunologist and said, I have CVID, and then here's the medication that I want. And that didn't quite go over as well as I'd hoped.
Funny how that worked.
But eventually, yes, it all got figured out, and with insurance, etc. So now I do an infusion every week for the rest of my life to provide this extra piece of my immune system that was missing, and which oddly helped with the transport of nutrients. And so remember the losing weight, right? And so how did I end up with an immune factor? And gamma globulin, shouldn't get into, but anyway, one of its many jobs in the body is transporting nutrients. And I already knew that I was on a high calorie diet. I was digesting really well. I didn't have gut infections or leaky gut. All of that was working great. So why am I losing weight? And that missing immune globulin, one of its many jobs is transporting nutrients. So it's like you've got a market full of produce, but no trucks to get it to the store. So anyway, so as soon as I got on that, I began to stabilize, and now I'm, better than ever. So, but research is the key. You got to trust yourself to research and stay off the miracle cure websites. You can identify them. And when you find people like my own website, it's huge. There's so much there that people say, oh, I like this man, or I like this person's approach. Well, go there to start your research and see who they've interviewed and what studies they reference. And that's how I do my work.
And I can see how that would work for you. Emery, I'm curious, does any of this sound familiar? That you get a diagnosis from a doctor, or the doctor really can't give you a diagnosis, and you're having to kind of figure stuff out for yourself. You do your own research. Does any of that ring a bell?
Yeah, absolutely. Because not everybody has access to the healthcare, or the healthcare just doesn't understand what the issue is. So going off and investigating it yourself, I find it very confusing, because I try and sort of learn a lot about diets and stuff, but I just keep hearing different things, and it's knowing where to go to get that really credible information. As somebody who's not from that background, I'd be interested to know.
Well, the medical journals, when there's a lot of good data in the medical journals, and certain websites of practitioners that can be useful and give you clues where to go, and then you just have to kind of stay off the rest. I do a huge amount of work with the herpes virus, and it's like a mainstay of my website, which is years ago, my person helping me like, oh no, you can't write about the herpes virus. I'm like, why not? I contracted it in the 1970s, so I have no problem with talking about it. It's a virus like any other virus.
Sure.
But anyway, I forget the point I was going to make. Oh, so that it's become a huge part of my practice, because I get emails all the time from people saying, you're the first person I found that has been there, that sounds like they know what they're talking about, has information that makes sense and it's coordinated, and it's not just, oh, I found this website with one product that says it will cure this virus. I'm like, you know, you got to know that you leave that website. That's not where you need to be. You got to find professionals and dig into what they're saying and what they're up to.
Emery, have you found yourself in a position of needing to do that kind of research?
Not so much. I mean, I try to stick to a relatively healthy diet, but I'm vegetarian, so this is really new stuff to me. It's quite interesting. Sort of the primitive side of it, and understanding, you know, the view from that, and not looking down. It's like, oh, I eat a lot of downs, but I'm very. I try and focus on proteins and stuff, and try and keep my body strong, because I do lots of weights and things. So it's really interesting to hear a different aspect of one I don't know. I mean, I feed my children and my husband all meat and fish and things like that, but this is really interesting. I'm learning.
That raises an interesting point, because there are many people who pursue a vegetarian diet. I mean, how do you advise somebody like that, Beverly?
Well, if they have contacted me for help, they found me on the internet and hopefully have spent at least 5 minutes on my website before they reached out for, you know, oh, you do consults, can you help me? So they're already have a sense of, wow, there's a lot of data here, and okay, I see, you know, there's data here about hunters and gatherers and whatever, but whatever, I'm going to contact this person. She sounds like she knows what she's talking about. So you know, there's always a way. But to me, here's a really important thing for me. I feel that when someone contacts me and they say, look, I have migraines or headaches every night, or I have this autoimmune disorder and migraines and headaches every night, and I'm going through menopause, I'm like, okay, well, we'll work on all of that. But to be clear, what you're asking me is, can you change the chemistry of my body, please? And it's a big question. When you go to a doctor for this problem and then the next doctor for the next problem, and of course we know how that goes. Sometimes it's hit, sometimes it's miss. But when you're working with functional health practitioners, complementary practitioners and doctors, and you know, our whole thing is, let's try to get to the root of what's happening here and see if we can impact a lot of stuff with the least amount of input, right? To get the max for the men, if you will. And so that question of, I'm not here to just, my own philosophy, I tell people, I'm not here to be a pill pimp. I'm not here to just sell you pills. That doesn't work. And then you buy them for a month or two, and then you're gone and off to the next thing. So we're not doing that. What I'm here to do is upgrade your food and upgrade your sleep. And to some extent, let's talk about your anxiety and your mind chatter that you're not managing. And these are the ways to biggest impact the fastest for whole body chemistry. And that to me is where true healthcare starts, is with whole body chemistry. And if we try to skip a step and just jump straight over, well, let's just work on the migraines. It's like, no, it doesn't work. Or if we do, then they might say, you know, what's interesting is that my constipation went away and we weren't even working on that. You know, I'm like, well, that's because we're trying a whole body approach. Upgrade your food, upgrade your sleep. I'm very passionate these days about talking about sleep apnea, for example, because I just got diagnosed and completely by surprise. And so as I've been studying sleep apnea and struggling through it, as people do, trying to figure out this sleep apnea thing, CPAP and so on, what I've found is that when you stop breathing hundreds of times per night, okay, this is serious stuff.
Oh yeah.
And you don't know it. we don't know that it's happening. And unless you have a sleep partner that's telling you you're snoring, you're gasping for breath, you stop breathing, I had to poke you, or are you still alive, or whatever. But we're fatigued in the day and our emotional balance is not right, and we have to get up to pee at night, which incidentally goes away with proper sleep treatment, which is really interesting. But sleep apnea is the largest single undiagnosed medical issue in the United States. I don't know about anywhere else. So we're talking tens of millions of women, children, men, people of all ages that have sleep apnea and don't know it. And talk about a whole body impact. Wow. I mean, I thought I had good sleep. Well, it turns out I had really low oxygen most of my sleeping hours. So that's a very, very bad thing. So,
Well, as you point out, I mean, if you don't have a partner you're sleeping with, that can be kind of challenging to figure out you've got it. I mean, how do you do that?
That I don't know. I mean, for me, the reason, put it as symptom number 72 that I'm on my quest, with my body to try to figure out, or a patient's body. But, I had headaches during the night and in the morning for 10 years. And I saw so many different doctors and modalities. I mean, osteopaths and dentists and neurologists and vestibular dysfunction, and I mean, brain surgery, whatever. I mean, I saw everybody to try to figure out headaches at night and during the night and in the morning. And as it turns out, when those headaches went away after 3 nights on CPAP, and doing the research, that headaches during the night is one of the top 6 symptoms. So I'm on this big passion now to try to educate people that if you snore, you have headaches at night, you wake up coughing at night when there's no reason for you to be coughing at night, or of course your partner says you're not breathing, or if you have a pulse oximeter that you can record your oxygen over the night by putting a pulse oximeter on your finger, and you can record your oxygen at night, and that'll tell you immediately that, because when you stop breathing, your blood oxygen plummets. And so a pulse oximeter is an excellent tool, and they're not expensive anymore, and you can just hook it up to your phone and get it to read out. Or many doctors now, I wouldn't say give them to clients, but whatever, offer them to clients, because you can get a lot of really good sleep information on a little more sophisticated model that way, before you do a sleep test. And then if you're over 65, you should be doing an at-home sleep test. You must be doing an at-home sleep test, because as we age, this collagen and all this and muscles and our throat get looser and weaker, and we're more likely to have the tongue and everything fall back and block our airway. So age is definitely a factor also. So age, daytime fatigue, snoring, coughing at night, nighttime or morning headaches, having to get up for urinations at night, and I mean, so anyway, that's now my new passion, is getting everybody tested for sleep apnea, and that includes your children if they're bedwetters or have ADHD diagnosis. That absolutely can be sleep. They're not breathing properly. Maybe their tonsils are enlarged and so on. So anyway, that's my little sleep apnea pitch.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you've clearly been doing the research on that, which ties into what we were talking about before, right? And in that research, you've discovered some really cool things. So thank you for sharing all of that. You mentioned earlier the podcast that you're doing. Let's talk about that for a moment. First of all, give people a little bit of the elevator pitch on that one, what that one's all about, how long you've been doing it, and then the follow-up question I want to ask at that point is, because this ties in directly to what my experience is, I found that the biggest benefit I get from doing this podcast is the expansion of my own perspective just by hearing other people's perspectives. I'm curious to know if you've had a similar experience. But before you even get to that one, just tell us about the podcast first.
All right. I've been podcasting for 14 years, and I call my podcast Primal Diet, Modern Health. Primal Diet, Modern Health. And the point being that, again, I'm a proponent of follow biology, eat the way your body is. You're not a cat, you're not a cricket, you're a human being. What do humans eat? And what have we eaten for hundreds of thousands of years? And how can we do that as responsibly and well as we can now with what we can afford and what we can find? And so primal diet / modern health. So the goal then is the best of modern healthcare. And so, yes, I try to help educate people. Hey, you've got this going on. Let's look at this. Or you just got lab work. Let me show you the basics of how to interpret lab work. And did you know there are a lot of consumer labs? You can run your own lab work. In most states, there are 5 that don't allow that. And so, for me, trying to coach people how to help find a better dentist that is very committed to not using mercury fillings, for example, and taking them out responsibly, and how to find better doctors and better health care, whether it's for food or your teeth or your feet, whatever it is, how to find the best of modern healthcare while you're addressing your chemistry with eating and drinking what we are meant to eat and drink. I drink only good water, so I haven't really had anything else to drink in decades. I'm just not interested, and so that's what we drank, and eventually we figured out how to ferment beverages, but I'm not going there. So but so that's Primal Diet, Modern Health, and there's a couple hundred episodes, and they're all, sometimes they have guests with books, and a lot of times it's just me talking about, hey, I've been studying sleep apnea. Let's talk about this. So, or here's how to ask your doctor to order the best blood work to check your thyroid. Here's what you want to order, and here's how you can approach your doctor to get the blood work run that you want. And that's a common problem, even when people have something they want, of how to get this across to your doctor so that they have a way to code it medically to justify why they ordered that test. So that's an important thing. And then here's a quick tip. Anytime you look at lab work, just basic blood work or complicated blood work, or salivary testing, I do a lot of that for hormones, so salivary testing, not blood. But anytime you look at lab results, aim for the middle. That's another one of my mottos.
Aim for the middle, yeah.
Aim for the middle. And, you look at a blood test and the range, it says it's 10 to 100, and your score is 12. So your doctor says, very good. Well, now wait a second. I don't think 12 is good on a range of 10 to 100. I'd much rather be right smack on top of 57 or something. Thank you very much. So that really opens eyes for a lot of people, that, wow, that number's been sitting right at the bottom of that range for 20 years. I'm like, well, you know what? We need to work on that.
Interesting viewpoint. Yeah. Because numbers on medical results can be like a two-edged sword. On the one hand, they can be very informative and they can help you guide yourself. On the other hand, you can turn it into a mental storm where you're freaking out over the numbers. So there's like a balance in there, isn't there?
Well, but yes, you're probably not going to be running cancer tests or something on yourself. I mean,
probably a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no, or AIDS tests or something that was going to be, problematic. You need to be with a physician, but lifeextension.com, for one, I'm no affiliate of mine, but lifeextension.com, they sell blood work very affordably. in all but 5 states. And they do that so that they can sell the life extension supplements. You know, you run a test and then you say, yes, I'd like a free consult. And then, you know, somebody gets on there and says, oh, well, you probably want some of our CoQ10 and some of our vitamin D. So that's how they make their money, is by giving you a reasonably good price on your blood work that may be a third or half of other what are called consumer labs. And there are consumer labs everywhere, where people can just walk in and say, hey, can you test my vitamin D, for example? But Life Extension does it efficiently and affordably, and you don't have to have a consult with them. But that's anyway, that's where I direct most of my clients to run their own labs. That's where I ran my own labs when I was trying to figure out why my body was starving itself. And you know, and also in my case, it kept that information out of the medical system. I didn't want to impact through the medical insurance system until I had more confidence about where I was going, because you know that you got to play that insurance game. I mean, I knew this was going to be an insurance issue because the medicine is extremely expensive. So I didn't want to. I wanted it to see if I'm going to fail the numbers before I went to the doctor to be diagnosed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I know what you're driving at. We're all to the point now where we realize it's no longer just a simple game of go to the doctor and then the insurance company pays the bill. It's become far more complex than that. And so out of necessity, people have had to develop a number of different strategies in order to handle that scenario. You know, the overall scenario of dealing with the insurance-driven, pharma-driven medical establishment that we have today. I mean, you just have to do what you have to do in order to survive it. And that's just here in the US, not even counting what they're doing in the UK or anywhere else around the world.
Well, and again, that's why I did a recent article and podcast on, you know, how to order thyroid tests. And it tries to explain exactly here. You want that to be covered by your insurance if you have insurance. And in order to do that, your doctor needs to see that you tick the boxes of certain symptoms that fit with the medical need to order that test. And so, you know, I say, okay, here are 8 symptoms of hypothyroidism, for example. So pick 5 of these that seem to resonate, like they might resonate with you, and these are the 5 you want to go to your doctor with. And you know, it's like maybe you're not constipated, but you add that to your list because it's one of the hypothyroid symptoms. So it gives the doctor something to tick that box, and yes, now I'll order what you asked for. And how to ask for the full panel of thyroid numbers, not the cheap version. So there's an art form in this as a patient, as we all know.
Oh yeah, it's a challenging landscape for sure, and we could probably do an entire show on that one. Maybe we will someday. I don't know. I'm not exactly lining up for it, but you never really know. Let's focus on a couple of things before we do our windup, though. First thing that I want to talk to you about is you've been giving us a pretty good overview of what is available to the public that probably most of us didn't even know was there. That was something that we could access. You also mentioned, and just as kind of in passing, you mentioned there are 5 states where there are limitations on it. Can you name what those 5 states are?
I'm not 100% sure. They're all in the Northeast. So like maybe Pennsylvania, New York. There are a couple of them up there that they don't allow consumer labs, but the rest of the country does. And you know, you can just, if you're in Pennsylvania, whatever, you can just search consumer labs Pennsylvania, and if you know, if they're not there, that's why. Or you can just pick up the phone and call Life Extension, say, can you order in Pennsylvania? I know I had one patient that was right near the border of another state, and the state they lived in was not one, but they could drive 40 minutes to the other state.
Okay, yeah.
And then they were allowed to order their labs through Life Extension that way, or anybody else. Like I say, there are plenty of other companies that do allow consumer labs.
Yeah. And that, well, that's also part of the overall challenge of dealing with a medical landscape that has become so convoluted. I mean, you can literally spend hours, days doing this kind of thing, just trying to figure out where you're going to find what it is that you need for your particular situation. And of course, everybody's situation is different because everybody's unique. Everybody's got their own thing going on. So it's a challenging landscape to deal with. And I mean, I don't know if there's any clear answers on it, but it's important to mention that this isn't easy to do. It's important to take control of your own health, but you're taking on something pretty big when you're doing it.
Well, yes, we are. And of course, you know, I like people to use my website. It's all there. It's all free. There's, you know, thousands of hours of work on there. I'll give another name for a website. I'm not affiliated with him at all, but for people that want solid science, not just like the quick tip biohack thing, which I'm very opposed to. You know, I'm like, no, let's get somebody that goes into this deeply. There's a practitioner named Chris Kresser, Chris with a C, Kresser with a K. And Chris has, he's very smart. He has a lot of podcasts, a lot of ebooks, a lot of materials. And, you know, recently I had a relative that was diagnosed with pre-dementia. So it's a field I don't know about. So I immediately went to Kresser's website to start seeing who has he interviewed. Oh, this guy. Oh, this guy. And then I go to his site and like, wow, this guy is, he is so far ahead of the rest of the neurological whatever. And, you know, anyway, he's a useful site that I can get good leads on of where I want to dig in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So good. That's helpful. Anne-Marie, I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier with you, because I'd asked you, had you found yourself having to investigate something like this? And I want to touch more on the challenges that are involved with this. Now, obviously, you haven't had to do a whole lot, but you mentioned, for instance, that you're a vegetarian. I imagine you've done some research along those lines. What kind? Tell us about, like, I mean, you're in the UK, so it's a different medical system. But tell us about the challenges that you've dealt with as you've kind of walked down that path.
Oh, what, with being vegetarian or just with the medical system? Because there's
a little bit of both. I mean, kind of tying them together.
Well, I mean, to give you an example of, I was actually talking to a friend about it today, but to give you an example about, I went to the doctor just to find out more about HRT, because just wanted to know a bit more about it. And I was told, I don't really know anything about that. Go back, research, and come back, I'll prescribe whatever you want. That's the kind of help that I've experienced. And that's, in the end, I'm just like, I looked into it and was like, no, that's not for me. I'm not a big fan of putting things into my body unless I really have to. But being vegetarian, and then I'm vegetarian because I never liked meat. I just couldn't eat it when I was little, and when I found out what it was, I just didn't want to eat it. But you know, I don't preach to anybody. I make sure my family eat whatever they want. But so I'm being very careful about, like, I want to make sure, am I looking after my bones? Am I getting like the right proteins? Like I said, I've been looking into proteins a lot more since I've been working out, making sure that I'm getting my fruit and veg and, you know, leafy vegetables. This probably goes against a lot of what you say, Beverly, that this is just what I've looked into of what's out there for healthy vegetarian diets, which is quite interesting in hearing what you say is a completely different perspective. So it's got my interest.
Well, as the quick tips version of anything to do with either hormones or bones, bioidentical progesterone and vitamin K2, those are where it's at. And I've got a lot of conversations on my website on diet and health, or the podcast, about vitamin K2. I'm actually one of the people that helped kind of break the story on vitamin K2. Wow. When I first started podcasting, that you never take vitamin D without K2. And this is not commonly known. And now, 15 years later, many of the products, even at the drugstore, do come now with K2, but they absolutely did not some time ago. And but K2 is really essential. And the reason, well, boy, this is a whole other hour, so I won't go there. But K2 is pretty much only available in animal organ meats. And when you think about when our diet changed, again, back to 13,000 years ago or so that I was talking about, after the last ice age, when we began keeping animals, and you know, we weren't eating the general population. We were growing in numbers. We were fast. The human population doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled because we had fire and hunting and skins and tribal communities and tools and smarts, and you know, we were winning. You know, I don't know where we are now, but now, of course, we don't eat the organs of the animals like we used to, and that's our main source of K2. So it's essential to supplement it, unless you're Japanese and eat natto, which is, you know, one of the worst possible things you ever want to smell. You know, it's like, just don't even go there. But vitamin K2, and then progesterone. I've run hundreds of salivary hormone tests, and on mostly on women, but from, like, say, age of 43 into their 70s, and almost universally we are deficient in progesterone. And the question then only mostly remains, are we high in estrogen or normal or low in estrogen? The low progesterone is almost a given. But many women have very high levels of estrogen and testosterone and no progesterone to balance it. And that's a dangerous thing. And other women just don't have hardly any of them. But we don't need much estrogen as we age. What we need is progesterone. It's the bone builder and sleep and anti-anxiety and good for our skin, and so much about progesterone. So and you can buy it without a prescription. It doesn't have to be an expensive compounded thing.
Well, we've been learning quite a bit during the conversation today, so thank you for joining us to do that. We also have a couple of things that we'd like to do at the end of every show. First and foremost, we didn't really mention it before, but let's mention it now. What's the website? How do people find the website and find all that juicy information you got saved up for them?
Well, my name is Beverly Meyer, Meyer, and you can just search for that. But the website is On Diet and Health, On Diet and Health. And the podcast is Primal Diet, Modern Health. I have a very active Pinterest community, actually.
Really?
That's probably my main social media, is my Pinterest followers there. And so there's like 1,000 or 1,500 pins over there that will help get people directed to searching and finding the information that I offer on any topic. It's a super fast way to search.
Very
and
cool.
that name is On Diet and Health. So
okay,
on Pinterest. Yeah.
All right, good. All right. So now we've given people a way to
and
find
my
you.
newsletter. Yeah. And my newsletter. If people subscribe to my newsletter, I've got 5 different gifts for people if they subscribe. One of them, you get a free ebook, my ebook of how I've cooked for 20-25 years. Without recipes. So it's a step-by-step ebook on, all right, here's what you're going to do. Here's what your next 3 hours are going to look like. You've got, you know, 2, 3, 4 bags of meats and groceries and things. And what we're going to do is take all that raw food and make it not raw food.
Okay.
And that's it. And it's not raw chicken, it's cooked chicken. Now, from that point, you can shred it, you can stir fry it up with something, or put hot sauce on it, or whatever you want. But to me, having a refrigerator now full of just plain cooked food, I can recombine it and add condiments and do whatever I want to pull together a fast meal in 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, good. Well, thank you for offering that, and I'm glad we have that to share with the listening audience. Second thing I like to do with every episode is to turn to my co-host, in part because Anne-Marie is also a former listener, so she has that listener's perspective, and just to get a sense of how she's taking all of this in. So, Anne-Marie, you knew I was coming at you with this. Like, yeah, I know you've been thinking about this, but what's your take today? How do you tie the whole thing together today?
how do I tie this all together? I think it's been fascinating actually, because it isn't stuff that I've heard before. So I found it really interesting. But I think what I've loved the most is how you are helping people to take charge over their health. Um, I love that you're telling people what to ask their doctors for and why you're asking them to do it and why they can explain to their doctors. Because I'm very aware that if we go to the doctors, my experience is it's just write you a pill, and I don't want to write a pill. I would rather use a much healthier way of getting better. So I think we all know the impact of food that has, like with processed food and stuff, but this was really interesting to have a different thing that I've been aware of to just heal a multitude of ailments. So for me, the overall thing is it was so interesting and just helping people to take control.
Excellent. All right.
Good.
So see, Beverly, you did your job. It worked. You got the message across. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. You can give me any topic and I'll talk for 4 hours. There's no problem at all.
Well, actually, kind of along those lines, that's the final thing I like to touch on each show, because now that we live in the 21st century where we're able to reach people all around the world, we're able to have this conversation. I mean, you're in Texas, I'm in Connecticut, she's in the UK, and it's like we're in each other's living room. That wasn't possible in the 1980s, 1970s, but we can do it now, and it's nothing, no big deal. One of the things that comes along with that capability, with the social media, with all of the different tools that are available to us and so forth, is that we have become sharers. Many of us anyway have become sharers of information. We want to help other people. And so we end up doing podcasts, and we end up writing books and creating courses and writing ebooks and all this kind of stuff. And in the process, we're reaching people, and we're creating ripples. We're sending waves of information, of energy, of support. And we're often helping people in ways we don't even know about, and we're not getting credit for it. And that's where I said, I can draw a line in the sand. So Beverly, on behalf of those people you've never met and never seen and never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping in ways you didn't even know about just because you're helping people, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Thank you. It's a privilege. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us and for sharing the story today. Best of luck with the podcast. By the way, you've been doing it like a half year longer than I've been doing mine. So I'm pretty impressed with that. That's very, very good.
Thank you.
So thank you much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.